Many times the reason your relationship conflicts feel so hard isn't because of what the other person is doing or saying, but because of what you believe about yourself. What if your worth as a mother, as a wife, as a coworker, as a friend, as a person wasn't actually on the line in that difficult conversation? Today, we are going to be talking about the identity crisis that we all bring to conflict at times, and how understanding who you really are can shift how you experience disagreement with the people that you love the most. Welcome to the Seasons of Joy podcast. I'm Jill Pack, and I'm so glad you're here today. This is episode number 187, entitled Divine Identity in Conflict: Why Your Worth Isn't on the Line. Today, we are talking about something that can change how you experience conflict and how it starts with understanding who you really are. Maybe you are preparing for a difficult conversation with your adult daughter or your spouse or your coworker. If I had you write down all the things you wanted to say, I would invite you to get curious about what you wrote down. My guess is there are things you wrote down that are flavored with proving that you are a good mother, wife, coworker. You so badly want them to see that you've tried your best, that you aren't the problem, that you are enough. But what if your worth as a person, as a mother, as a spouse, as a coworker, as a friend, isn't actually on the line in this conversation? I know that many times it can feel like it really is. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because the truth is most of us bring this identity crisis right into our conflicts. When we do that, we can't actually resolve anything because we're too busy defending our worth to create connection. So today, we're going to explore how understanding your divine identity, your true self, can completely transform how you experience and navigate conflict. I want to start by asking you a question. When was the last time you were in conflict with someone you love? Maybe your adult child, your spouse, a friend, or a family member. And as that conflict was happening, what were you thinking about yourself? Were you thinking, I must have done something wrong? If I were a better fill in the blank, mother, wife, coworker, friend, this wouldn't be happening. Or what is wrong with me that I can't fix this? Or maybe they think I'm a terrible person and I need to prove that I'm not. Many of us struggle with embracing who we are, and nowhere is more evident than when we're in conflict with the people we love the most. In conflict, here's what this identity struggle looks like. We compare our relationships to others. We look at our friends whose adult children still come to family dinners, or whose kids followed the faith, or who seem to have their marriage all figured out, or succeeding in their career, and we think, what did I do wrong? We feel like we failed in all areas of our life, whether a mother, as a wife, a friend, coworker, right? We play these conversations in our mind looking for evidence of our inadequacy. We feel like we failed and that we need to defend or explain ourselves. We can't just let the other person have their perspective. We have to make sure that they know we're not the bad guy. We can't let someone be wrong about us, right? If they think we did something hurtful, we have to convince them otherwise. Their perception of us feels like a threat. There are those relationships where we're desperate for their approval or validation. We need them to see us as good, as trying, as enough. And without that, we feel lost. Can you see this in yourself? I know that there are times I can see this in me. And this is what I call the false self, and it often shows up in conflict. Some people call it the ego, the natural man, or as Brooke Snow has taught me to understand it, the false self. And here's what the false self does when we are in conflict. The false self needs to win to prove our worth. If we're wrong, that means we're inadequate. So we have to be right. The false self takes everything personally. A difference of opinion becomes a judgment of our character. The false self stays defensive and closed off. We can't be curious because curiosity feels too scary, too vulnerable. What if we learn something that confirms our worst fears about ourselves? The false self makes the conflict about our adequacy instead of the actual issue at hand. The false self operates from fear, shame, and inadequacy. Every word feels loaded and heavy. Every interaction feels like a test that we might fail. I want to give you a personal example. Most of my adult children, as I've talked about before, have stepped away from the faith that my husband and I have raised them in. And so for a long time, when I was in a situation where I was reminded of this choice of theirs, I would immediately go into this defensive spiral. And it wasn't an outward thing. It was within my own mind. And my mind would race with thoughts like, I did the best I could. Don't they see how hard I tried? I can't believe they're choosing the opposite of what we taught them. And what I was really thinking underneath all of that was, if I were a better mother, then they wouldn't do this. This proves I failed. I was bringing my false self, my fear that I wasn't enough, into my conversations and my interactions. Yet when I did that, I couldn't actually hear what they were saying or see them as children of God doing the very best they can. I was too busy defending my worth as a mother. Can you see how this false self shows up when you're in conflict with your adult child or your spouse, your friend, your coworker, when their words feel like an attack on your worth? This is the identity crisis that we bring into conflict, and it keeps us stuck. So let's talk about why conflict feels so threatening when we approach it from our false self. When we believe that our worth is on the line, our nervous system reads conflict as a literal threat to our survival. Our nervous system doesn't know the difference between real and perceived. Now, I know that this can sound dramatic. Your adult child is disagreeing with you. It doesn't actually seem like a threat to your physical survival, but your nervous system really doesn't know that. When you believe, if they think I'm a bad mother, then maybe I am, your brain interprets that as danger. And when your brain perceives danger, it activates your stress response. You go into fight, flight, or freeze. Fight might look like getting defensive, raising your voice, or needing to prove your point. Flight might look like avoiding the conversation altogether, changing the subject, or leaving the room. Freeze might look like shutting down, going silent, or feeling paralyzed when your mind is racing. But here is the problem. When your nervous system is in that threat mode, you cannot access the parts of your brain that allow for curiosity, empathy, and connection. You can't be curious about their perspective when you're busy defending yourself. You can't empathize with their experience when you're trying to convince them that you're not the problem. You cannot create connection when the other person feels like the enemy. And this is exactly what the adversary wants. I believe that Satan's purpose is to confuse us about who we are and whose we are. Because when we're confused about our identity, we operate from fear instead of love. We see conflict as something to win or avoid instead of an opportunity for understanding and connection. When we operate from this place of confusion and fear, here's what it costs us. It damages our relationships. Every conversation becomes a battle instead of a bridge. It keeps us in perpetual defensiveness. We're exhausted from always trying to prove we're good enough. It causes us to miss opportunities for deeper connection, because the richest conversations often come after we've navigated conflict with curiosity and care. When we operate from our false self in conflict, we actually teach our children that their worth is tied to being right, being perfect, or avoiding mistakes. We pass on the same identity crisis to the next generation. But there is another way. What if you could approach conflict knowing that your worth isn't on the line? What would be different if you truly believe that you are a divine being right now, in the middle of this conflict, even if you made mistakes? What if your worth isn't determined by whether your child agrees with you, or whether your spouse validates your feelings, or whether you handled a certain conversation perfectly? This is what I mean by your divine identity, your true self. Your divine identity is who you really are. It's the truth that you were created by heavenly parents who love you completely and perfectly, exactly as you are right now. Nothing is wrong with you. You're not broken. You are complete and whole and worthy. You didn't earn this divine nature, and you can't lose it by making mistakes or having imperfect relationships. This is the truth that will set you free, especially in conflict. Because when you're grounded in your divine identity, your experiences and relationships change. When your divine self shows up in conflict, you can stay curious instead of defensive. Instead of immediately explaining why you did what you did, you can ask, "Tell me more about how that affected you." When your divine self shows up, you can hear feedback without defining you. When your adult child says, "You were really controlling when I was growing up," instead of spiraling into "I'm a terrible mother," you can think, "This is hard to hear, and my worth isn't dependent on being a perfect parent. I can listen to their experience." When your divine self shows up, you can let someone be upset without needing to fix it. You don't have to make them feel better to prove you're a good person. You can hold space for their emotions while staying grounded in who you are. When your divine self shows up, you can take responsibility without shame. You can say, "You're right, I did do that, and I can see how that hurt you. I'm so sorry," without it meaning you're a failure. When your divine self shows up, your nervous system can stay regulated because there's no threat to your identity. You're not in survival mode. You can access the parts of your brain that create connection. Maybe you're having a conversation with one of your adult children and they bring up something that you'd done years earlier that hurt them, something you didn't even remember doing. Your immediate instinct, your false self wants to say, "I don't remember that. Are you sure that's how it happened? I would never intentionally hurt you." All of that defensiveness is coming from the belief that if you hurt them, you're a bad mother. What if you could catch yourself and pause, allowing yourself to remember that your worth as a mother isn't on the line in this conversation? You are a divine being. You've always been enough, even when you make mistakes. Their experience is valid, and hearing about it doesn't make you worthless. So instead, you could maybe say, "I don't remember that specific moment, but I believe you, and I'm so sorry that I hurt you. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me." And you know what may happen? That conversation softens. They share more. You connect more deeply than you have in months. Not because you were perfect, but because you show up grounded in your divine identity instead of defending your false self. This is the foundation of conflict transformation. When you invite curiosity, awareness, regulation, and empathy into the conversation, you don't need to defend your worth. You can only be curious when your identity isn't threatened. You can only regulate your nervous system when you don't see the conflict as a danger to your survival. You can only offer empathy when you're secure enough in yourself to hold space for someone else's experience. Divine identity isn't just a nice spiritual concept. It's a practical foundation that makes conflict transformation possible. So how do we shift from false self to divine self in the middle of a conflict? It starts with noticing. The next time you're in conflict or you're thinking about having a difficult conversation, notice what's happening in your body and in your thoughts. Are you feeling defensive? Do you need to explain yourself? Are your feelings hurt in a way that feels overwhelming? Do you desperately need them to see that you're right, that you're enough? These are all signals that your false self has shown up. And that's okay. There is no shame in it. We all do it. It's part of being human. But this is also your invitation to pause. There is so much power in the pause. So here's what I invite you to do. Close your eyes. If you're driving or in a situation where that's not safe, just soften your gaze. Take a breath through your nose, hold it for a few seconds, and then breathe out through your nose. Continue this pattern, breathing in, holding, breathing out. Let your nervous system know that you're safe right now. And then as you're breathing, I invite you to ask yourself, what false belief about myself is this conflict touching? And just notice what comes up. Don't judge it, just observe it. Maybe it's, I'm not a good enough mother, or I failed them. If I were better, they wouldn't feel this way. Their choices reflect my worth. I'm too much, or I'm not enough. Whatever the belief is, just let it surface. Now, as you hold that belief in your awareness, I want you to repeat this. Even though I believe, whatever that false belief is. So for example, even though I believe I'm not a good enough mother, and then continue, This is my journey. This is my classroom. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm becoming. And feel those words. This is all part of your human experience. This is the 50-50 of life, the opposition that shapes us into who we are meant to be. And now reconnect with the truth of who you are. I am a divine being right now, even in this conflict. My worth is not on the line. I have a divine purpose and potential. I am enough. I am loved. Let me say that again because I want you to really hear this. I am a divine being right now, even in this conflict. My worth is not on the line. I have a divine purpose and potential. I'm enough. I'm loved. Our heavenly parents couldn't love you more than they do right now. Not if you fix this relationship, not if you handle this conversation perfectly, not if you never made another mistake. Right now, exactly as you are loved. And when you remember that, when you reconnect with that truth, things begin to shift. You can open your eyes now and recenter the conversation or the situation from a different place, not from fear or shame or inadequacy, but from love, from wholeness, from your divine identity. This pause, this practice of reconnecting with who you really are is how transformation begins. So let's talk a little bit about what becomes possible when you know your divine identity is secure. When you approach conflict grounded in your true self, here's what changes. You can be wrong without being worthless. Think about that. How many arguments would end sooner if we weren't terrified of being wrong? When your worth isn't tied to being right, you can say, you know what? You're right. I didn't think about it that way. Or thanks for sharing your perspective. I hadn't considered that. You can apologize without shame. I'm sorry doesn't mean I'm a terrible person. It just means I made a mistake and I care about you. When you're grounded in your divine identity, apologizing is actually a gift you get to give instead of an admission of failure. You can set boundaries without guilt. You can say, I'm not willing to continue this conversation if we're yelling. And know that you're caring for yourself and the other person. You're not being selfish. Your needs matter because you matter, not because you've earned it, but because it's true. You can receive criticism as information, not indictment. When someone gives you feedback, you can hear it as data about their experience instead of proof of your inadequacy. That's helpful to know. Becomes possible instead of, you think I'm a terrible person. You can love someone who disagrees with you. This is huge for those of us with adult children who have made different choices than we hoped. When your identity isn't wrapped up in their choices, you can love them fully without needing them to validate you. You can be in conflict and still know you're enough. The conflict doesn't have to be resolved for you to be okay. Your worth isn't dependent on the outcome. This is what I mean by conflict transformation. Conflict will still happen. It's part of life. It's that 50-50 part of life. But when you bring your divine self to it instead of your false self, the conflict becomes an opportunity for growth, for understanding, and for deeper connection. It becomes what I call neutral information instead of a threat. I have also noticed that the people around us feel the difference too. When we show up grounded and regulated, not defending our worth, but curious about connection, it gives others permission to do the same. It creates safety in the relationship. It opens the door for honest conversation. It models what it looks like to be human and divine at the same time. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get this right every time because remember, your worth isn't on the line. You're a divine being right now, even as you're learning, even as you're growing, even as you're still figuring this out. So let me bring this all together. Conflict is going to happen. It's part of life, part of relationships, part of being human, but you get to choose which self you bring to it. You can bring your false self, the one who needs to win, who takes everything personally, who's desperate to prove you're enough, or you can bring your divine self, the one who knows that your worth isn't on the line. You can stay curious and open. You can transform conflict into connection. And that choice starts with remembering who you are. I would say it takes practice, right? We have to practice that belief so that it does become part of us. that understanding that you are a divine being, you have a divine purpose and potential, you are enough, and you are loved. You have to practice that. This truth is always available to you, even in the hardest conversations, even in the most painful conflicts, even when you've made mistakes. And that's why it's important to practice believing it when you're not in those hard conversations, when things are peaceful, so that you can settle it within you. Your divine identity really is the foundation for everything, for joy, for peace, for connection, and yes, for transforming conflict. So here's my invitation for you this week. Notice when conflict triggers your false self. Just notice, no judgment, just awareness. And when you notice it, pause, breathe, and reconnect with who you really are. Again, this is where transformation begins. If you want more support with this, I would love for you to check out my Conflict to Connection 30-day challenge. You can find all the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here today. And remember, you were created for this season, and your influence for good is needed now. Until next time, may you find joy in the journey.